Θα προλογίσω τον εκλεκτό μας προσκεκλημένο, τον κύριο Pierre Bascou, Διευθυντή στη Διεύθυνση Βιωσιμότητας της Γενικής Διεύθυνσης Γεωργίας και Ανάπτυξης της Υπαίθρου της Ευρωπαϊκής Επιτροπής. Κύριε Μπασκού, είναι τιμή μας που είστε μαζί μας. Θα προχωρήσουμε τώρα με την παρουσίαση του κύριου Μπασκού, ο οποίος έχει εστιάσει κυρίως στην πράσινη διάσταση της μετάβασης και όχι μόνο. Κύριε Μπασκού, όποτε είστε έτοιμος, θα χαρούμε να μας κάνετε την παρουσίασή σας.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I will have to speak in English in order to express myself. I will not speak in French. I will focus on English. First of all, I would like to thank GAIA ΕΠΙΧΕΙΡΕΙΝ, I think, for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here. This is already the third time, I guess, and I hope one day I will be able to pronounce your name, correctly in Greek. Most seriously, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the role of the CAP strategic plan in supporting the green and digital transition. Supporting this transition, and I would like to start by that, I think is, in our view, absolutely fundamental if we want to address, I think, the two of the most important challenges of our time, namely climate change, and second, I think, the degradation of environmental resources, and in particular, the loss of biodiversity. This is absolutely fundamental, and if we want to ensure food security in the future, both in Europe and at global level, we need to address these challenges, and the farmers have a real and positive role and contribution to make in this endeavor. So I would really insist that I think for us, I think there's no way out. I think this green and digital transition is an absolute necessity. It is clear, and it has been repeated several times this morning, that there is a new geopolitical context has disrupted a little bit, I think, this path, I think, this long-term prospect and orientation that we want to put in place. But please make no mistake, in our view, we will have to adjust, and we have already started to take some decision at Commission level in order to address, I think, the difficulty linked to this war in Ukraine, difficulty linked with the uncertainty, difficulty linked with the economic impact, difficulties which are going to stay there for another 2, 3, 4 years, because clearly the commodity markets are expected to remain disrupted, I think, by the war in Ukraine, even if the war was to finish, I think, within the next few days. But it is clear that, I think, for us, the long-term orientation, I think the direction of travel remains that if we want to ensure food security, we need to ensure sustainability and climate neutrality. What will be important is to build on the synergy between the green transition and the digital transition, and of course, at policy level, I think, to address when there are some tensions, when there are some difficulties, I think we will have to address that. So in the presentation today, what I would like to start, I think, by recalling a bit, I think, the broader picture about where we stand and why we are engaging into this transition, the dual transition, green and digital. And after that, I will focus a bit more, I think, on the CAP strategic plan. And I would like also, as it has been done, I think, earlier this morning, give some information related, I think, to the proposal of the member states in the context, I think, of the draft CAP strategic plan, which have been submitted to the Commission in the first quarter, to show you basically how things, I think, could be put in place in this green and digital transition. So let's start, I think, by the broader picture and by recalling that this green and digital transition is being framed, and it is done in line, I think, with the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. As a reminder, the Green Deal is basically the new growth, and I insist on the word growth, is a new growth strategy that the EU is promoting in order to reach sustainability, resource efficiency, and climate neutrality by 2050. And it's this growth strategy, the Green Deal, is covering all the different sectors of the economy, and its translation for agriculture and the food sector, the food system, is the Farm to Fork strategy. It has four main, I think, objectives of this Farm to Fork strategy, and it's good to remind them: reducing the environmental and climate footprint of the food system. Second objective, which is extremely important as compared to what has been mentioned this morning, is to lead a global transition towards competitive sustainability from agriculture to the consumption of food. This is very important. I think the EU does not want to make, I think, this journey towards climate neutrality and sustainability on its own. It would not make any sense. And as Monsieur Madre has mentioned this morning, if we do it on our own, we're just going to export our, environmental and climate footprint of our food consumption. We need to do it, I think, with all our trading partners. And I have to say that if at the beginning of the journey it was a bit difficult with our trading partners on the other side of the Atlantic, now with the new US administration, I think the cooperation is much better. Third objective of this farm to fork is what we call to tap into new opportunities. And by new opportunities, I mean carbon farming and the development of circular bioeconomy. We want to launch, and we have started already 2 years ago, to launch initiatives in order to better valorize all the different, elements which makes, I think, biomass. We now, a lot of co-product and byproduct are not valorized by the farm sector, by the food sector, by final consumers. We want to better valorize all this, and we want to create new opportunities to develop biofertilizers, to develop, plant protection product of biological origin, etc. We want to develop also, the potential of carbon farming. So there's a lot of economic opportunities also to develop, and that will benefit, I think, the farm sector. And the fourth objective, and it was designed in 2020, and I think it revealed, I think, to be quite relevant, is to build a robust and resilient food system in the EU. We had the difficulty linked with COVID. Now we have the difficulty linked with the war in Ukraine. And I think this shows that I think we need to put in place a food system in the EU which is robust and which is resilient. So far, we didn't have too many problems, but still at regional level, we have seen over the last 2 years sometimes some difficulty of supply of food for consumers, or difficulty for the farmers to have access to fertilizers, to have access to labor, in order to harvest, etc. So this element is extremely important. And all this orientation is important to achieve sustainability, resilience, competitiveness, because sustainability is not only about environment and climate, it's about also socio-economic objectives, competitiveness, and climate neutrality. And what is important, and I would like to really underline that, is that we do not want to focus, and this morning we talked mainly about the primary sector, we do not want to focus only on the agricultural sector. We want to broaden that and to look at the whole food system. So we need to change how we produce agricultural product, how we process, food product, how we and how these food products are being transported and put, I think, on the retail store. But we need also to change how we consume. And Mr. Batten this morning was referring to some analyses which have been undertaken, even within the Commission, and this analysis didn't take into account, for instance, what we want to achieve in terms of changes in food consumption. Second element which is important is that we want to build on research and innovation. It was very interesting this morning again by the rector. We heard, I think, about what happened, in Europe, in agriculture in Europe in the 50s, 60s, 70s, etc. And we have seen that we have managed to increase very significantly, I think, the level of productivity, thanks to the product of research, thanks to the product of, to the result of innovation. We want to do the same. I think it is more than time that, the use of knowledge, new technologies, but it's not only an issue of new technology. There's a lot of new knowledge related to agronomic practices that we need to better exploit and that we need to diffuse. Because now they are used, I think, by this new knowledge is being used by a few lucky and happy farmers. It is more than time that I think that we diffuse, that we spread, I think, this knowledge in order to have, quantum leap in achieving sustainability and competitiveness. And the last point that I would like to mention is that in order to achieve this overall objective of sustainability, resilience, competitiveness, and climate neutrality, we need also to have a kind of enabling policy framework. And this concerns, I think, a series of action in the food sector, but also ambitious, a CAP strategic plan. This is absolutely critical. Many initiatives for the food supply chain. I will go very, very quickly because it's not directly, I think, the topic of today, but this is important to mention them. The Commission has started already 6 months ago to present a series of policy initiatives and legal initiatives related to the environment, related to climate legislation. They are called the Fit for 55. They are related to nature restoration, nature protection, legislation. We are going to come up with new legislation in the field of soil, for instance. We have come up with a new regulation related to the use of pesticide and the necessity to achieve, sustainable use of pesticide. It does not mean that we want to abandon the use of pesticide. We want to reduce the dependency of farmers on the use of chemical pesticide, and we want, to reduce significantly the risk associated with this pesticide. There are other ways to treat and to address, pest infection, integrated pest management, production methods, etc., new genomic techniques. I think the Commission is quite open to that. We are also going to come up with some new initiatives related to the bioeconomy, to animal welfare, to also a series of legal initiatives next year in order to promote the shift in food consumption towards more healthy and sustainable diet. And this morning also, somebody mentioned, this new initiative related to labeling, nutritional labeling, labeling of origin, etc. So they, towards the end of the second semester of 2022, towards the end of this year and next year, the Commission is going to launch a series of initiatives in order to really, I would say, broaden, the scope of our activity, and not only focusing on agriculture, but focusing on the whole food sector. For the agricultural sector, and I would say, for the primary sector, we have also presented in the Farm to Fork, some what we call aspirational targets. And one of them, the reduction in the use of pesticide. I should stay close to the micro. The reduction in the use of pesticide, has already been translated to some extent into a legal proposal. But all the other, objectives that you see, on the screens are there in order to illustrate the level of ambition of what we want to achieve. Less synthetic pesticide, less use of antimicrobials, less also excessive use of fertilizers. And I think this is very different from talking about a reduction of 20% of fertilizers. What we want to do is to reduce substantially, the excessive use of fertilizers that we see very often in relation to intensive animal production. When there's a lot of co-product from the animal sector, this is spread, like manure, this is spread on the soil, and we want to reduce the nutrient losses, coming, from the sector. But in some countries, we will see an increase in fertilizer use over the next few years. We want also to re-establish some ecological infrastructure. And the last element, which is important, for our discussion, is that we want to reach 100% access to fast broadband internet in rural area, and this by 2025. It's a big challenge, let's face it. In some countries, we will not make it by 2025, but this is absolutely critical in our view in order to develop the economy of rural areas, and also it is important in order to provide farmers with, the right tool and having access, to the digital tools in order to improve the competitiveness and sustainability. So at the level of the agricultural sector, the CAP and the CAP strategic plan will be the main vector, the main policy framework in support of the farm sector. Three key objectives, for the future CAP that will be implemented in the beginning of next year. First, what we are discussing today is a green transition toward sustainable agriculture with the improvement of the environmental and climate footprint of the activity. But also, second objective, the strengthening of the competitiveness and resilience of the sector with a specific focus on the family farm. This is very important. We want to refocus and rebalance, the granting of public support towards family farming. And the third objective, which is also one of the key topics of our discussion today, is the modernization of agriculture and rural areas by improving the sharing and the diffusion of knowledge, by promoting innovation, and also by promoting substantially the digitization of the sector. So how do we intend, to improve the environmental footprint of agriculture? Is we are proposing to act, and to use, three leverages. The first one is to have, what we call a more strategic and coherent approach. Coherent, I think, between what we will do in the CAP and what exists under environmental and climate legislation. There's no point in asking a member state to prepare, a climate and energy plan with some commitment in reducing greenhouse gas emission, etc., with a chapter on agriculture, and to do something totally different under the CAP with other types of financial incentives, etc. So this is the first, I would say, element. The second element is that I think we will have a new policy toolkit with a new system of conditionality, so this set of mandatory standard of production by the farmers. And we have raised, I think, the level of ambition of these mandatory standards, like, I think, crop rotation, protection of peatlands, etc. And also new financial incentives, all of them. I think this is the famous eco scheme. And the last element, I think, on the right-hand side of the slide is very important, is that I think we want also to ensure the alignment of what is being done on the CAP with the objective of the Green Deal, but also with the upcoming initiative of the Green Deal that I just mentioned. Upcoming initiative related to animal welfare, to soil protection, to pesticide, etc., etc. So I would like to, this was, I think, for this kind of broader picture and the context and the key features, I think, of the strategic plan. What I would like now to show you is basically the proposal, what has been proposed by the member states in the context of the strategic plan that they have submitted to us towards the end of last year or the beginning of this year. This strategic plan, we have all received them, by the beginning of March. Some member states, I think, were a bit late. Now, all these proposed strategic plan have been published on the website address, which is mentioned on the screen. The Commission has evaluated this plan. The Commission has prepared and put all these comments, I think, in what we call, observation letters. All these observation letters have been approved. They have been published. And at the end of May now, we have 28 observation letters. And what we are doing now is that we have entered into negotiation with the member states, because our ultimate goal is first to have an ambitious strategic plan that do address the needs of farmers in the context of this long-term orientation towards sustainability and competitiveness. But also, we would like to have this strategic plan, adopted as soon as possible, because farmers, and most of you are farmers, need to know basically what will be the rules that they will have to comply with in order to receive the financial support. So I tried, I think, on this slide, I think, to summarize the main messages, I think, that we have put in this in the observation letters, I think, for all the member states in relation to the environmental and climate ambition. And clearly, we acknowledge that many efforts have been done by member states in order to ensure, I think, this travel towards sustainability for the environment and climate objective. But clearly, more work is needed. And I would say for some countries, including Greece, much more work is needed in order to meet the expectation and what we want to achieve in terms of environment and climate ambition. And this relates to different elements, different dimensions. The first one is that we have realized that I think there's not enough contribution and alignment between what is being proposed in the strategic plan with the environmental legislation. So in many strategic plans, the river basin management plan, I think, for water, for the Water Framework Directive, are not taken into account. There's not enough, taking into account, I think, of the commitment that member states have taken in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emission, et cetera, et cetera. So we are going to ask, I think, member states to revise that and to increase the level of ambition. Ring fencing requirements, so this minimum level of spending, this has been more or less respected by everybody. And this morning we saw from the COPA presentation, I think the ring fencing respect for eco scheme and second pillar. Conditionality layer. This is maybe, I think, the most important element in the whole environmental architecture. This is the fundamentals. This is the set of standards that a farmer will have to respect that you will have to respect in order to receive the financial support. And for some of these new standards related to the protection of peatland, to the implementation of crop rotation, to the implementation also of the biodiversity standard, we believe that I think they need to be reinforced in many countries. And I would say this is the most contentious element in all the negotiation with the member states, conditionality. In terms of, environmental practices, eco schemes, etc., I think there's quite a broad coverage of environmental dimensions. And also, the last point, which is important, is that the targets are too low. What do I mean by target? Is that in terms of impact indicators and also commitment. So I think the area covered, I think, by environmental commitment, for instance, are too small. The level also of impact in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emission, in terms of improvement, I think, of soil erosion, etc. I think the level of ambition which have been set by the member states are too low. So I think we are asking almost all the member states to revise, I think, the level of ambition. I can tell you, I think with some member states, it is a very difficult exercise, but we are hoping to finalize all this negotiation by the summer. A few slides, I think, to illustrate all that. This is the minimum level of spending in the second pillar. As you can see, all member states have to respect a minimum 35% of the second pillar, rural development, that need to be allocated to environment and climate. And as you can see, I think 2 member states are still not yet there. And depending on the country, you have, some countries like the last column on the right, I think Denmark, Hungary, Ireland, and Luxembourg, that will allocate more than 2/3 of rural development budget to the environment and climate ambition. You can see Greece, I think, is in the range, I think, of between 35 and 45. So Greek public authorities have done, I would say, I think they respect, I think, the obligation, but without, overdoing it, if I may say so. In terms of spending, I think, in the second pillar for environment, you can see that 2/3 of the spending will be absorbed, I think, by what we call agri-environment and climate commitment. So basically, we are supporting, member states want to support, I think, the introduction or the maintenance of certain practices with this payment. 18% will be used to pay for these areas with facing natural constraints, typically mountains, and 18% also for what we call, I think, green investments, so all the investment support that will be used for environment and climate purpose. 3 slides regarding, I think, the GAIA, and I think I would say, I think these standards that need to be respected, and which are new GAIA. The first one relates to the protection of peatland and wetland. It concerns a bit less Greece, but I think you have, some wetland and peatland, I think, to protect. And as you can see, many countries have decided, I think, they have proposed to the Commission to delay the introduction of this protection of peatland and wetland towards, I think, 2025. And we are trying to, I would say, to encourage, to invite the member states, I think, to be a bit more ambitious, because we should make no mistake. Wetland protection is very important, I think, for biodiversity, but wetland and peatland are extremely important, I think, as a carbon sink. Something like 40% of carbon in the soil in the EU, but at world level, they are in the soil of peatland and wetland. So there's no point, I think, in putting a lot of obligation and constraints for farmers with permanent grassland if, at the end, I think, we don't protect the soils where the carbon is ready. Second GAIA, and this is, I think, the most contentious one, and I think this is what I've been working for the last 6 weeks, almost day and night, is the implementation of the obligation by farmers to introduce crop rotation from 2023 onwards. It is an obligation which exists under the GAIA number 7. As you can see, the first row, 11 member states have introduced, I think, this obligation. By rotation, we mean a change of crop at parcel level year after year. Some countries are trying to use, and this is the second row, are trying to use one possible derogation, which is only, legally speaking, which is only possible, I think, at regional level, and they're trying to use it across, I think, the whole country, so 8 member states. So you can imagine that we have, intensive discussion with these member states, and in particular one, I think, that I know extremely well. So this is, I think, the most contentious issue, because clearly, for farmers, the introduction of this obligation for crop rotation, I think, will lead necessarily, in the arable crop sector, of course, will lead necessarily to some significant changes. And some countries like Greece, we have put Greece in blue. Greece, I think, has proposed, the Greek public authorities have proposed to have the alternative crop rotation in certain sectors and regions, and crop diversification in others. But if you want to retain one thing from this presentation, is that this is what we are going to discuss basically until the last minute, I think, with each member state. The other GAIA that I would like to mention is the GAIA number 8, which is a standard related to the protection of biodiversity on the farm, with a new provision for the future CAP is to allocate 4% of arable land to the protection of biodiversity with what we call non-productive elements, edges, ponds, terraces, etc., etc. And farmers will have to respect this under different conditions. And I think the conditions, I think, have been identified, I think, on this slide. But you can see that Greece, I think, in the last column here, is one of the 11 member states that will offer the 3 different options for farmers to fulfill, I think, this important standard, which is good for biodiversity. And this is something which is very positive, because, for instance, Czech Republic and Hungary have chosen, I think, to fulfill this obligation only, well, partially, I think, with some productive elements, which are, of course, less effective for biodiversity protection. This was for the mandatory part. If we look now at the financial incentives in order to promote and support the green transition, we have we have both. Eco-scheme in the first pillar and agri-environmental measures in the second pillar. I think in the first pillar with the eco-scheme, you can see, I think we have tried, I think, on this table to list according to the different themes, biodiversity, soil, organic farming, natural management, precision farming. We have tried to list, I think, the main, I think, themes, and list, I think, the number of countries which are proposing, which are giving the possibility to the farmers to use, I think, this financial incentive for a specific scheme. And you can see Greece is in blue. Greece has proposed, I think, to support the introduction of precision farming, which is very positive. It has also proposed, I think, to support, I think, the protection of biodiversity, the maintenance of permanent pasture. Greece has proposed also the development of organic farming. But you can see that across member states, I think there's a wide range of choices which have been made, which is normal. Through the strategic plan, we want to give the possibility to member states, I think, to tailor, what they want to support on the basis of the needs. This was for eco-scheme. For rural development, I didn't go into all this detail because we have more than 300 different types of commitment. But you can see that, climate change, the protection of natural resources and biodiversity are basically representing the bulk of what member states want to support through the second pillar. Maybe a last slide, I think, on the environmental part, I think, is the support to organic farming. As you have seen, I think, on this aspirational target, there is one target, and this is the only one that concerns directly your production system. The Commission would like, I think, to promote the development of organic farming, because first, I think, it is a production system which is good for the environment and climate, and also a production system that addresses, I would say, a need, I think, from the consumer side. And we have proposed 25% by 2030 of land in the EU farmed under organic farming. As you can see, this is the level of ambition of the different countries. I think so far, on the basis of the proposal of the member states, we are going to double the area covered by organic farming, so to go from 9 to 10% to 20%. Of course, now we have engaged into negotiation with the member states, and we are inviting them to do a bit more. And we hope, I think, to go from 20 to maybe 22, 23% by 2027. As you can see, then for Greece, I think the green bar now is at 10% as compared to the grey bar. I don't know if you can see it, which was at 5% before. So basically, Greece has proposed to double the rate, I think, the level of land that will be supported, I think, for organic farming over the next, programming period. Let's move now quickly to the objective of knowledge sharing, innovation, and digitization. And I tried on this slide also to summarize, I think, all the findings and observations that the Commission has made, I think, to the 27 member states. Clearly, I think the Commission has raised, I think, the issue that we need to strengthen the digital strategy in the proposed national strategic plan. And I think we need to increase, I think, the coherence in this respect in the strategic plan. We need to optimize, there's a need also to optimize, I think, the use of these digital technologies, not only to improve the economic situation and the level of competitiveness of the farm sector, but also to address, I think, the environmental and climate impact of this of the sector. We want also to address, I think, some kind of constraints, some elements, I think, which are, impeding, I think, the development and the upscaling, I think, of the use of these digital tools. This relates, I think, to the digital divide between rural areas and urban areas, and I was talking about this target on the access, I think, to fast, broadband internet. We want also to develop, skills, data availability, all these, ingredients which are, absolutely necessary if we want, I think, to develop the use, I think, for the farming community of all these digital tools. And one element that we have also raised is that because some countries have told us we're not going to do too much in terms of digitization because there's not enough money in the CAP. And what we would like to underline is that there's a possibility, even within the strategic plan, to refer to other funding sources, either national or either EU sources, like regional fund, like the new fund for recovery and resilience fund. So there are other types of funding that can be used in order to support the digitization in the farming sector. Some element also, in particular, with regard, I think, to the synergy between the green and digital transition, is clearly that, in our view, I think the increased use of both digital sensing, in situ, and the use of, information, I think, coming from space. This can be used, I think, through, smart farming to improve the production efficiency, to improve the management of pesticide, to improve the management of nutrient, also to improve, I think, the processing and the marketing of product. So there's a lot of benefit, I think, to digital technology rather than only, I think, the issue of the competitiveness. And to be noted, once again, that only 6 member states have proposed, I think, to support, I think, the introduction and the development of precision farming at member state level, which is, in our view, a problem. One element concerning the proposed level of spending, I have only 2 or 3 slides left. The first one relates, I think, to the budget dedicated to knowledge exchange and information. So really, I think, the spreading, I think, of the knowledge at farm level. As you can see, I think many member states have proposed, I think, to allocate a very small share of the budget from the second pillar to this diffusion of knowledge and the promotion of information. And Greece is one of the good pupils, I think, of the class, if I may say so, since Greece is proposing, to allocate between 3% and 4% of the second pillar, I think, to this promotion action. But I think this is something which is extremely important. There's a lot of new knowledge, there's a lot of new technologies, and we're asking farmers to change sometimes practices, in other times, production system. It is absolutely fundamental that farmers are better accompanied, I think, in this journey, in this transition. If we don't manage, I think, to use the CAP to promote, I think, the provision of advisory services, to promote the access to farmers, I think, of this new information, I think we can provide a lot of financial incentive to pay for certain practices. It will not work. So I think this is one element which is absolutely key, and I'm very happy that this morning we talk about that. Yesterday in the discussion, in the debate that we had, I think we also mentioned that. This is one element which is absolutely fundamental, and I would like to underline that in the letter of observation that we have sent to Greece, we have, stressed, I think, the need also to better use what we call the operational program under the European Innovation Partnership. This operational program basically puts together farmers, advisors, public authorities, sometimes the food industry, I think, researchers, etc. And I think they try to basically either find a solution to one issue and diffuse it, or try to use one specific practice, one specific production system, one solution which has been discovered and put in place in one country, in one region, and to diffuse it in another region. And these operational groups under the European Innovation Partnership are extremely powerful. It's a very powerful element. We have more than 2,000 of them in the EU. And if we want, I think, to really promote the potential of all this new knowledge, this is through this European Innovation Partnership and through this operational group. So we have recommended to Greece to put a specific focus on this knowledge and this European Innovation Partnership. a slide concerning the share of farms that would benefit, I think, from support for digital farming technology through the CAP. And clearly, as you can see, we don't have information from a lot of member states, but you can see even for Greece, I think less than 1% of farm would benefit, according to the proposal of the Greek public authorities, would benefit from support, I think, for introducing and using digital farming technology, so which is, in our view, I think, too low, much too low, and this seems to be in contradiction with all the efforts which have been undertaken at national level in order to promote digitization. So, concluding slide, just to say that I think the Green Deal and the future CAP, I think, will very much focus on the support, I think, this green and digital transition in order to enhance, I think, the sustainability, the competitiveness, and climate neutrality. Again, not only for agriculture, but also, I think, for the whole food system. And for this, and this is what Dimitris was mentioning this morning, there will be, I think, at the disposal of member states and farmers, I think, a much more flexible tool called, I think, the strategic plan. It is clear that after that, this is for each country, each region, with all the stakeholders to make the most, I think, to optimize, I think, the use of the strategic plan. It is clear that this is not Brussels, this is not me in my office in Brussels to tell the Greek public authorities what is best for them in terms of water management or nutrient management. But I would say that beyond the legal framework and beyond the financial incentive, and it is my last word, what we need is a change of mindset. It is absolutely fundamental. We know that changes is difficult for everybody, for the farming community, for us, for everybody, but in my view, I think in this journey towards climate neutrality and sustainability, I think we need, beyond, I think, all the mandatory elements and the financial incentive, we need to have a change of mindset, I think, of the farming community and of the whole food system if we want to make this journey, a success. And this doesn't need, a lot of financial support. It needs, promotion. It needs conviction, and for this, we also need to rely, I think, on the whole food chain. This morning we heard about the state, about ministries, about the banking sector, about, I think, farmers' organizations, cooperatives. Everybody wants to move into this direction together if we want to make this journey a success. Thank you very much, and apologies for being a bit long.